complain a lot in IUCN that there should be more attention to nature conservation. The World Heritage Sites, now we have nearly 1,200, so many more, we're told, the historians of the convention.
And when we are inscribing these sites on the list, does it play a role in protecting it?
Interesting question.
In the Arab region, there are 6 sites only inscribed on the list, the natural sites. Why do you think there is a less attention given to the natural sites?
The spectacular nature conservation values across the Arab states is not really matched with the number of World Heritage Sites that are deserved.
This is a question that might come into many people's minds. How can nature become heritage? Welcome to another interesting episode of My Heritage podcast from the Arab Regional Center for World Heritage, where we celebrate the richness and diversity of world heritage through delving into the interesting stories of our experts. Today, we have the pleasure to have a remarkable expert with us in the field of heritage. Our guest today is Tim Badman, the Heritage and Culture Head at the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's very nice to have you with us today. Tim, you have started your career that was very interesting. How was your journey? Started in heritage.
Well, it started, I guess, with my education, and I grew up in the rural and coastal part of England. I went to university and I studied geology, and I wanted to study geology because it mixed together different sciences, because it meant you could be outdoors and to be in the fresh air and on the ground. And then I got my first job, which was a postgraduate invitation, a training session in a national centre in the United Kingdom, which worked on what they call environmental interpretation, which is not about the type of interpretation you do to sort of translate between different languages, but it was about the way that places, heritage places, are presented, whether those are cultural heritage or natural heritage places. So that was really, although it wasn't really a heritage job, that was where I first started work. And then I worked in local government, so worked on the ground with communities in 2 different counties in England, and the second of those counties, which was where I'm from, was working on a World Heritage proposal. So that was what led me into the work in World Heritage and eventually to start work internationally. But my background is, I always think of being at ground level, site level management.
That's an inspiring journey and interesting. And as mentioned, you have been working at IUCN. How is IUCN contributing to the conservation of heritage?
Well, IUCN, so International Union for Conservation of Nature, was established 75 years ago, over 75 years ago, by UNESCO to work on the conservation of nature and the conservation of natural resources. And over that time, we're a large organisation and we work on many different areas of nature conservation and on sustainable development. But we were very much involved in the founding of the World Heritage Convention. In fact, in 1966, which I'll share is the year I was born as well, IUCN's Congress in Switzerland that year was the first international forum where a proposal was made. It was made by the delegates from the United States for something that would help with UNESCO to become the World Heritage Convention. And it said, well, there were some places that were so important that they should be shared and protected by the whole of the international community. And it said that should be a list of places. It should be both natural and cultural significance, and the name World Heritage was included in their proposal. So this sort of DNA of the World Heritage Convention, in a way, was something which IUCN helped to bring into being. UNESCO had a series of proposals as well, and in the 1970s, the World Heritage Convention came into being. So IUCN was named at that time to be the technical advisor on nature conservation, and our main contribution, to to heritage really has been focused on building on that role in the World Heritage Convention, where we're the advisor on nature conservation, on protecting important ecosystems, places that are important for species, places that are important for geology, and the most spectacular places on the Earth.
So as you mentioned, the inscribing of sites on the World Heritage List started after the convention. Why is it important to inscribe these sites on the list?
Well, so World Heritage has its heart a really powerful and I could say beautiful idea, which is that there are places that are important to the whole of the world, and so the whole of the world should come together to protect and to support those places together. And so really the idea of World Heritage is to recognise the World Heritage sites. Now we have nearly 1,200, so many more, we're told. The historians of the convention say that the list was never expected to be as many sites as it is, but these are places that are put forward by countries as highly significant, and the international communities agreed to come together to recognise and support. Yeah, that creates a huge challenge as well, because on the one hand they're spectacular and important, but they're also places that are frequently highly threatened, and they're also places that need to show a really good example of what good conservation practice should look like, what nature conservation, what cultural heritage protection should look like. So that in a way is also the challenge of protecting these places. But we'd like to, if you ask the question, why is it important? Firstly, because these are intrinsically spectacular and important places, but also because they should serve as an example of conservation practice more widely. That's the goal and sometimes the challenge.
And when we are inscribing these sites on the list, does it play a role in protecting it?
Oh, it certainly does, and I think I can relate back to before IUCN to the experience of working at ground level, preparing a World Heritage nomination, and then working on a World Heritage program for 5 years after the site was listed. And it certainly provides a focus for the need to set high standards and the need to achieve protection, but it also doesn't fundamentally change that the responsibility for places is held at local level and is also held by the government that has made the nomination. But we work extremely hard, but also we try to be very constructively engaged with the World Heritage sites to support the people on the ground that value them, and the people on the ground that benefit from them, and the people on the ground that are responsible for their future.
So when we are inscribing these sites, does it play a role in the development of countries? And have you seen something remarkable in that case?
Well, yes, I think it's clear, although perhaps more as an observation focused on cultural site listing than the sites for nature conservation, because we complain a lot in IUCN that there should be more attention to nature conservation. But it's clear that one of the unique realities of the World Heritage Convention is that the governments concerned have to support the proposal and they have to take responsibility for it. But it's often clear that that countries making proposals are really looking for recognition of the importance of places in their areas. There's often in their countries. There's often also local drivers, local expectations that a World Heritage site is going to lead to more support. It's going to lead to contributions to the local economy, to tourism, and so on. So, yeah, it's been it's sometimes quite remarkable how invested countries are in supporting their World Heritage nominations. And I should be careful. I won't give you specific examples, but as IUCN, we're often in the difficult position of not supporting, not agreeing that a site is ready to be put on the World Heritage List, because we have to advise the decision-taking committee, the World Heritage Committee, on whether a site meets the requirements of the convention, and these are very high expectations. And so quite often we recommend, we say, well, the sites could be very important, but there's problems with its protection and management, the boundaries are not correct, there are often concerns of support from local communities, and so we don't think the site should be recommended. And that can be a very difficult place to be, because countries have very high expectations of their sites being listed, and also this process of listing, the UNESCO process of listing, has very small opportunities. There's only a few spaces each year. If you miss your slot one year, you don't get the slot next year. So there's a lot of pressure as well to have success quickly.
This is a question that might come into many people's minds. How can nature become heritage?
Well. So one of the interesting realities of the World Heritage Convention is it's one of the few international instruments that talks about nature as natural heritage, and excuse me, I think it's, in some ways, it's a question of terminology. Now we would probably say conservation values or nature conservation significance, but the idea that nature is our common heritage is something which I think is a very powerful idea. I think there are a few ways in which nature is kind of fundamentally heritage. Firstly, because I think I've explained to you, I'm a geologist. Firstly, so I often look at nature conservation and think, we forget very much in nature conservation that, the planet is this amazing 4.6 billion year old place that we happen to be here in a tiny fraction of time, and where we're living now has been in the past, the home of the dinosaurs, and the home, a place where there was, once no life on Earth, and all the life was in the oceans and so on. And a place that's changed very fundamentally over billions of years. So in a way, deep time heritage is the heritage of the planet. Is one important aspect of nature that the World Heritage Convention has recognised. But I think then, what's important is to see that people have a relationship with nature. It's people that give value to places and live alongside our fellow species, and help to create and live in ecosystems. And so we tend to sort of separate nature from culture and people in the way that many scientific disciplines have created themselves over the last 100 or 200 years. But actually, in many and most cultures, that separation is not how people live their lives. And to think of the places as as something that people are living in, people are handing to future generations is just as valid for what we call nature as what we call culture.
You also have worked as a team leader in one of the natural sites in the United Kingdom, the Devon and East Dorset coast, which is a natural World Heritage Site. Tell us about your experience there.
Well, that was, as I say, where I learnt about World Heritage, and had it was an incredible privilege really to be where I come from. I was born in Devon, and I grew up in Dorset, and went back to Dorset not to work on World Heritage, but found when I had a job which was working on coastal management and coastal policy that there had been an idea created that maybe this coastline, the Dorset and East Devon coast, was significant enough to be a World Heritage area. And in fact, we're meeting here in Bahrain 2 days after the funeral of a great friend and mentor of mine, Dennis Brunsden, who was the founder of that idea, and has just passed away. And I think I've been just back in Dorset and East Devon thinking about this work, and remembering what happened in 2001 when we were when we were put on the World Heritage List. And yeah, I don't know what to tell you about it. I mean, it was somewhere where I think I learnt most of what I still apply in my work in IUCN and try to bring into the way that we work on World Heritage. And I think there were, 2 or 3 things that were significant about working on a World Heritage proposal. I mean, the first was, we didn't see it as changing the whole place. It brought a recognition of the geological heritage of Dorset and East Devon to the surface. We had a story to tell, and the story was 155 kilometres of a coastline, which had geology which started at the dawn of the dinosaurs and ended at the extinction of the dinosaurs. And so you had this incredible fossil story. And at the same time, we had a coast that was extremely varied, where you could really teach and learn about every aspect of coastal, what we call geomorphology, the way coasts get created, how beaches are created, how cliffs are formed, the way the sea and the land are continually changing the landscape. So we, firstly had to sort of work out how to weave this new idea of geology and geological heritage into the story we were telling. I mean, secondly, we worked all of our, put all of our energy into making sure that this was a project that was owned locally. It was never going to. We never expected that if you got on the World Heritage List, somehow UNESCO would be arriving with a bucket of money or a load of experts that were going to come and work on the site. That we had to make sure we had responsibility for it. We needed to make sure there was a realistic idea of what might change and what we wanted to not change, and how it might contribute to what the community's expectations were, how it would, be supportive of and not blocking different types of development or activities. So we spent so much time meeting community groups, meeting the local councils, meeting the landowners, meeting the different users of the coastline to try to design a process together. And then it was an opportunity to really bring leading scientists, many of whom responded incredibly generously to the request to join a World Heritage proposal. But many of whom had been trained or had been inspired by the stories of Dorset and East Devon coast. Visits there. We had, this incredible sort of laboratory. So it was also very exciting to prepare a bid where there was really good international engagement and national engagement with the most brilliant earth scientists and geologists, geomorphologists, specialists in nature that we could find to help us. So no, it was a very inspiring moment, and then a very nerve-wracking moment as well, because you put all your passion into writing the proposal and you send it to UNESCO, and then nothing happens. It's sort of silence for a year, and then you wait for the envelope to come and tell you whether it's a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation. You go to the World Heritage Committee and still think, is this project that we want recognised going to happen? So so I lived this life on the ground for a long time.
That's great, and I definitely think that having the site inscribed in 2001 was an amazing feeling back then.
Yeah, it was the first. I now live my life around UNESCO and the World Heritage Committee, but it was the first time. I'd been in Helsinki in 2001 to sort of see how this enormous machine, which is much bigger now, that recognises and supports World Heritage, actually went. But yeah, it was really quite a satisfaction that after 5 years of effort, this project had come together, and then that was the easy bit. Then the big challenge is to then make a site really work and live with World Heritage going forward.
As we know, there are natural sites and there are cultural sites. How can these together be linked?
Well, yeah, I think we've been spending in the work that we do on World Heritage now, and really, this has been a bit my I guess sort of passion and obsession somehow since working in IUCN is to try to bring together the approaches in the World Heritage Convention to cultural heritage and to natural heritage. But in a way, it all starts because if I think back to Dorset and East Devon, at the local level, say we were trying to weave geology into all the other things that were going on, and it was a place with very important biodiversity conservation values and huge cultural heritage, and lots of important archaeological sites, and this sort of story of how people had lived over a long time. And so I never really see the separation at ground level, at site level, what we've, increasingly call the place-based approaches and people-centered approaches to World Heritage, because at ground level, people, there is not a separation, and part of the challenge of World Heritage is that the ideas that are sort of baked into the World Heritage Convention of cultural heritage and natural heritage come somehow from, I guess you could say, European, Western sort of sense of how you organise sort of knowledge and ideas. But actually, most cultures, if you think of how different cultures, different peoples sort of orientate themselves to places, don't put nature in one box and people in another box and culture in another box. So somehow, I think the bringing together in the first place is a very obvious thing to do if you say this convention's about places, because the connections are always there, even if sometimes they're very obvious and sometimes you have to work a bit harder. But the ways to bring connections together, I think, what we've been trying to explore, and there's many different ways to think about that. But one is to recognise that values and what is valued needs to respect not just these globally significant, outstanding universal value of World Heritage, but everything that communities value, Indigenous peoples value, local interests value about a place, so that we sort of see that every place is a whole place. And the second, but really the foundation for making that equation work is to always respect and work with the communities, the interests, and the people who live and work with heritage. And you were kind enough to introduce me as an expert, but one of my concerns is we use the word expert a bit too freely, and I don't think anybody that goes on the ground in a World Heritage site that's come from somewhere else should call themselves an expert. You should call yourself a specialist. You should call yourself somebody with new knowledge and ideas to offer to the site, but the expertise and the relationship is always something which is local.
In the Arab region, there are 6 sites only inscribed on the list, the natural sites. Why do you think there is a less attention given to the natural sites?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think there's a few more that are listed for their natural and cultural values as well, another 3. But it is true, and it's been a long time observation of ours that the potential for recognising the spectacular nature conservation values across the Arab states is not really matched with the number of World Heritage sites that are deserved, and certainly relative to the number of sites listed, for their cultural heritage and frequently built heritage is, there's a lot of gaps and a lot of things that are missing, and I don't know all of the reasons for that. I think sometimes with World Heritage, the challenge is whether you've got the ministries and the agencies responsible for nature really involved in the work of the World Heritage Convention. So I guess sometimes I think it may be that in the Arab states, or at least in a number of Arab countries, the way that the relationship built with World Heritage over time was sort of more with cultural heritage institutions and the culture ministries, and so somehow maybe that connection was not always made. But I also think in general, the convention has been, needing to find ways that reach out to regions in ways the regions actually want to, respond to and understand and relate to. It's why, being here in Bahrain and at the Arab Regional Centre for World Heritage is such an important connection for our work, because we sit in an office in Switzerland. The other advisory bodies have their offices, in Europe. We do have an office in the region, but for World Heritage, we've always worked from the international headquarters, and you can never really, get enough into the connections and understanding with the region if you work like that. So somehow I think there is some missed connection in the way perhaps that natural sites have been looked at, and I guess the fact that there are proportionately more mixed natural cultural sites in the Arab states relative to natural sites than most regions might give us the clue that that way of thinking about the connection of nature and culture might be a better way to understand what is the important heritage of this region than just looking at the biodiversity and the geology boxes separately. I don't know. Maybe those are the reasons. It's hard to tell. You should tell me the answer to the question. I'm just a visitor, but maybe those are some of the reasons.
As we know, the heritage sites face many challenges, and climate change definitely imposed many threats on the sites. How did it affect the natural sites?
Well, you're absolutely right about the significance of climate change, and IUCN also since 2014 we established a global assessment of how natural World Heritage sites were doing. We call it the World Heritage Outlook, and in 2014, in 2017, and in 2020 we made 3 different assessments of how World Heritage sites are being threatened, how effectively they're managed, and we saw over that time that from 2014 to 2017, climate change was identified as the most rapidly growing threat to natural World Heritage sites, and from 2017 to 2020 became the single most widely identified threat to natural sites. The impacts are very diverse and different, because the way that climate change is creating threats and challenges to World Heritage sites depends on the nature of the site, the nature of its values, but also the way in which climate change is happening. So we see changes in extreme weather events, the absolute level of increasing temperatures in the oceans, as well as temperatures in the atmosphere. We've seen, we have some sites which have a significant risk from fire. We have sites that have threats from invasive species, and we expect climate change to also, create more and more challenging pathways for invasive species. And then we see climate change also creating impacts on people and on the capacity of sites to be managed, which is another way that sites themselves can face challenges. So it's very, it's diverse in different ways in which the climate threats are impacting. But yeah, it's concerning that it's a growing threat, and we know it's not an issue that the sites themselves can deal with on their own, or even in countries can deal with either. So World Heritage sort of works by the idea that you ask the site to act to conserve, and then if you ask the government of the state concerned to provide more effort and more energy and more support, but climate change can't be solved by action at either of those levels alone, which makes it also a particularly challenging threat to deal with.
And throughout your journey, did you notice any difference and changes in the understanding of natural heritage?
Well, interesting question. I think we see there are several, I guess, sort of changes, whether it's quite the understanding of natural heritage, but things I think that are important to identify that World Heritage somehow represents as recognition of what do we call nature and what do we call natural heritage. One is, as we've just been talking about, climate change, but I think more generally the recognition that biodiversity, the diversity of life on Earth, species and ecosystems is increasingly threatened. It's hugely challenged by a crisis, which is the other side of the coin to the challenge and the threat from climate change is the loss of biological diversity on the planet, the loss of the nature that sustains us and protects us. So it's clear that over the lifetime of the World Heritage Convention, the direct threats to nature have grown and grown. And firstly, World Heritage sites are, places that include the most spectacular areas we have for protecting biodiversity, and so recognizing that change of the level of threat to nature is the fundamental driver of IUCN, and we really think that that there's a new plan to conserve biodiversity, ambitious targets to halt the loss of biodiversity between 2030 and 2050, but really the action is urgent already now and was urgent 10 or 20 years ago. So that I think is one key heart of what we're doing to try to raise those issues and to see World Heritage raise those issues. I think World Heritage is helping to really bring an understanding that nature goes beyond biodiversity and includes the geodiversity, the geological diversity of the world. So I've talked a bit already in this conversation about geology and about geomorphology, but World Heritage was decades ahead of the conservation discourse we're trying to work on now, in recognising that we should care about the memory of planet Earth, and it's these millions and billions of years of history that predate us here. So I think that understanding, which has also grown with UNESCO's recognition of global geoparks and a whole range of geological heritage initiatives, is the second point. And right now, the third point is there's a major and long overdue recognition in nature conservation policy and practice that Indigenous peoples have held in their territories places of huge significance for nature by the stewardship and the relationship they have with their territories, and so the respect and protection of their rights, the placing of leadership power and recognition in the hands of Indigenous peoples, and really supporting a world where we don't see only a sort of state model of or an expert-driven model of nature conservation being appropriate, but really recognising that supporting rights of Indigenous peoples is a way to achieve these goals for biodiversity, but also be more just and more equitable as societies is a third really important component, where World Heritage has many different challenges as well in terms of recognising sites that where those standards have not always been upheld.
Amazing. And what is an advice that you would give for the young professionals who are working in this field?
Okay. So I do, one of the pleasures of the work that I do is I get the chance to occasionally teach teach groups of students. Mainly, it's a very self-interested thing to do, because mainly it's a way to meet people that have got really great ideas and things that questions that help us think about how to do our job better. But we do have quite a lot of opportunities in IUCN to talk to young professionals about how to make a career. And I think for the work we do in World Heritage, the most important advice, apart from continue to get a good qualification, a master's level qualification. Unlike when I started my career, this is a really important level of qualification to have, but really to get field experience. So the one piece of advice I think is any experience to make contact with real world conservation programs and projects, work with communities, work on the ground, work work to understand what it really takes to make conservation practice happen is really golden experience to be able to sort of show that alongside, your technical knowledge and your sort of expertise, you could say, around a particular field of heritage conservation, you've actually gone out and tried to make this work in the real world with real people, with real places, and can see how to bring people together, how to be respectful and understanding about what's important. So that's field experience is the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your experience, your advice, and your insights. It has been remarkable and valuable. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure to join you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here at the Arab Regional Centre to exchange on these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What a journey it has been. We had the opportunity to hear from different experts the stories in the field of heritage, from archaeologists uncovering the forgettable sites to museum curators preserving the artifacts, specialists diving in the depth of the sea to protect its beauty, to experts putting all of their efforts to protect our natural and cultural sites. Together, we have delved into these stories and viewed it from different lenses. We thank you again for joining us on this remarkable journey. And remember that our heritage is not just part of our history. Heritage is not just the past. It is a living, breathing entity that shapes our present and future. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tim. It was amazing to have you as our last guest and ending this podcast. I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did. Thank you again. And thank you, everyone. My Heritage Podcast from the Arab Regional Centre for World Heritage.